Well, thanks for coming out, everybody. So we are standing between we're standing you between that and a cocktail. So we better not suck, right? So thanks for coming out. I just want to have a little announcement. Chris said he's having everybody at his room after the session for drinks. So what's your room number? We'll get that tweeting.
It's a big room. My name's Brian Corbett. And what room am I in?
No.
Okay.
So my name is Christian Tilmani. I'm a user experience architect with Microsoft. Been with Microsoft a little over 11 years. I sit in Austin, Texas. This is Chris.
And I'm a user experience evangelist for Microsoft. And I've been with Microsoft for less time than Christian, right? So about 3 years. So this is kind of weird because we're going to talk. I'm curious, how many people are designers in the room? And how many people are developers? And how many people just wandered in here accidentally and aren't really sure why they're listening? Okay. So this is kind of a weird topic. And it's kind of a weird topic because I think it probably means a lot of different things to different people. Did everybody see the keynote this morning? Raise your hand if you didn't see the keynote or had no idea what we said. Okay, so we might have to talk to you a little bit afterwards. And be on time next time, okay? But one of the things we're going to talk about here is try to kind of put out some common standards when we talk about workflow and lifecycle management, why you should care about it. As a designer, it's not something we always think about, but we probably do every day. And we're not going to go into the details of a lot of new stuff we talked about this morning. There's some other sessions that do that around what we can do with SketchFlow and the next version of Blend and Silverlight. But I'm guessing most of you are kind of familiar with a lot of that stuff too. What we want to talk about is how can you take actual processes in specific software and technology to help us better run our businesses when we're practicing a lot of these UX principles. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to spend a few moments kind of setting up some common definitions for some of this stuff, because some of us probably are a little concerned about what we mean when we say certain things. So we're going to try to see if we can solve some of that for starters. So first of all, this session is really about making hard things easier. That's really what application lifecycle management's about. And it's also about picking the right approaches. I'm from Chicago, so I always know you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, right? And sometimes we got to have the right tools to do our jobs really well. It's also about understanding how we're different. Designers do some very different things than developers do. When we can figure out how to work together, though, we can do some pretty powerful things. We're also going to talk about how to not ignore dysfunction. And a lot of times in our design processes and what we do, we don't ignore dysfunction. We just don't know what's happening, right? There's always surprises that come up, right? You know, one real-world example is you build this whole app, everybody loves it, and you find out, wow, looks like the processor is pegging 90%, you know, during a key activity or something like that, right? And if we have processes in place, right, and testing and procedures and things that can start tracking all this data, we can get insights into things before they become big problems for us. And then finally, we want to learn how to push our teams in the right direction, right? This isn't about taking all the control away that we have as developers or designers, but it's about making sure that we're helping people solve the right problems. And sometimes with a lot of our processes and the complexity we have with everything we need to do, we just don't have enough information to know if we're making mistakes. And then sometimes we get stuck, right? And the best thing about getting stuck is to have all the procedures in place so that you don't, right? Or that you know the 3 or 4 things you need to do to get unstuck. So a quick history of user experience workflow. There's half designers in the room, right? One thing that design isn't, that we always think about, is it's more than this. And Microsoft probably historically is pretty guilty of this, right? Design is, Christian will design a great app, and what do? You call me up, and what do you say? Make it pretty.
Make it pretty.
Yeah, make it pretty. And I may say, well, you know, I don't even think anybody would find that button that you want them to click in this report. And he goes, well, it's done. It's built. You know, you just need to style it and make it pretty. And when that's all design is, for a lot of us, what it really means is that we're going to shortchange some of the outcomes we can have with our software development process. And by that, I mean things are just icing on a cake, all right? And sometimes we get really confused because we think that's what design is, especially when it comes to software and services. And design's about a lot more than that. And when we hate designers or we get mad at them sometimes it's because we think that they're the source of a key set of problems for an application. Like people say, I hate this application, I can't use it. Well, if all you did is figure out how to color the little buttons and the interactivity, and you didn't have any insight or any input, and you didn't get to work with the developer on building the whole application, sometimes it can mask problems, right? Because things look pretty. We all like shiny things. I love shiny things, right? But they can mask problems when we don't apply all that design thinking to how we should work. So design workflow kind of starts early. And how many designers know Charles and Ray Eames? Right? Charles and Ray Eames were designers, kind of disciples of the Bauhaus in the mid-20th century. And they started mapping out design processes a long time ago. Now, this chart may look kind of funny to you, but it's really a Venn diagram, right? And it's a Venn diagram about where innovation happens. And if we look at a lot of design processes that are really successful today, and if we look at a lot of software development processes that are really successful today, they all come from this canon. Designers, though, a lot of our processes really come from graphic design, and they come from print. And we've probably seen a lot of these processes before, right? These different stages we go through, they probably look pretty similar to software design, too. Some of them get very detailed in terms of how we work, and they're very linear processes that we've had over time. And we've even adapted these processes, right? We think about agility and how we want to be faster in terms of how we do things. And sometimes we do really complex stuff, right, where we don't. How many people use agile methods in this room? How many people wish they could? And then how many people just don't get that option? Does anybody not get that option all the time with some of the stuff they do? We're fortunate for the folks in this room. But we think about all these processes and how to be better. And we think about, those little iterative steps we can take over and over again to refine things. And if we think back to Bill Buxton this morning, right, we talked about, prototyping and iteration, right, how that's a key to software. Or when we had Netflix up there, right, how many times did Netflix say they'd upgraded their Silverlight player experience? And so they actually deployed Play on Demand. And that's a really important part of software, right? It's not just building it and getting that out the door, right? But it's about making it better, and the user doesn't even know that you did that, right? Maybe you fixed the 4 bugs that they've never experienced, and they don't even know that you updated them, right? And when we go through those design process and think about things, we have a set of things designers do, right? We have a standard way that designers like to work, and that usually starts with sketching, right? This is an example of Paul Rand, who designed the IBM logo and also designed something called the Rebus. Has anybody heard about that? Rebus is just this little visual iconography for IBM, right? I guess they're going to have to rethink about that if they buy Sun. But it's good enough for now. But these sketches are what he started with, before he created that logo. It's a standard way that designers work. We like to storyboard and tell narratives. This is an example of a script that Charles and Ray Eames did for a museum for IBM. We forget about this as designers and maybe even technologists, but you know what? CEOs used to actually work directly with designers. Like, a lot of companies in the 50s and 60s, if you look at GE, you look at UPS, you look at IBM, they had a history and heritage of working with designers. And this is just an example where they sketched all these little storyboards to go along with the script that they wrote. And if we look today, we probably see a lot of familiar processes we have today, right? This is a page from a style guide that I did long ago that's annotated, that tells people what the different functions are in an application. This is okay for websites, right? But, what if I have an AJAX-enabled application, right, where I've got 15 different states in a panel? Documenting them this way starts to hurt, right? When I start giving people those big... Did anybody ever get a big stack of hundreds of wireframes that told you how to build an application? We have a name for that in the world of design. We call it design porn, because it looks really pretty, but as soon as you start building something, it's not really valuable anymore, right? Because it doesn't reflect what we have to do. And this is design porn. And we do all these things. They look nice. They tell us what to do. But one of the challenges is that this doesn't always translate and adapt to the way developers need to work with things, right? So we have kind of a process that's kind of a challenge right now. There's kind of a Tower of Babel between what designers and developers do. And we try to fix some of that with a lot of the insights we get, right? So not just about making something shiny or pretty, but figuring out all the steps that we go through before we even start design. But design planning starts sooner than that, right? It's all about intent. So a lot of the schools and the things that we do and a lot of the ways we work together start way sooner than before we sit down at a laptop. And one of the big challenges is that this working style is not really reflective of how we work in the world right now. How many people work with people in a team that just aren't in their own office, but maybe in another part of the world or a different time zone? Does anybody do that? How many people have customers that are in different time zones or all over the world? So this whole nice model of, hey, there's 4 of us, we all sit around the same table every day and have a great time, and I can complete his thoughts. It's not the option we have all the time right now when we work. So one of our challenges is, the way we need to work needs to change a little bit, I would submit. And I would even submit that a lot of the processes that we know really well need to change and are broken too, right? So this is processes I developed as a practicing creative director that worked with technologists, all the deliverables that we would do when we created any software application. And there's a lot of things there, right? And we would simplify this. We'd figure out, what are the technical blueprints and how do those relate to my interactive navigation flows and our system contact diagrams, right? We had to create all these artifacts and documents for how we'd need to work. And even in the web, right, there's conventions or standards that we think about in terms of what we do. But the trouble is here because right now, designers and developers just aren't talking very well with each other. That whole way that I create Photoshop comps, and that needs to be implemented as a SharePoint website, right, or a Silverlight application, there's a lot of churn in terms of how we do that. And we can do better. And we're going to show you today how you can build on top of everything that we kind of heard about this morning about building applications and software with some specific tooling. And that's about designer and developer workflow using something called Team Foundation Server. So we'd like to kind of show you what we're talking about, and then we'll go into detail about some of the things that we've seen.
So this workflow that we're going to actually demonstrate is it is a designer-developer workflow with a little bit of project management mixed in. It's not the typical designer-developer workflow you probably have known and seen from the Blend conversations and Blend demonstrations. We're going to widen the scope a little bit. We're going to introduce. How many have worked with Team Foundation Server before? Okay, great. Some of you haven't, so we won't assume that. But it's hard learning TFS in an hour. So bear with us. Some of this may be a little over your head, but we'll try to simplify as much as possible for those who haven't touched it. And
there we go.
So Bernard here is going to kick off the designer workflow. He's going to act like a designer.
I am a designer, Christian.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm going to act like one here, too. And as a designer, you know what? A lot of times I have my tools. How many of us use Adobe Creative Suite? Right? So I like to kind of design stuff right now. I mean, I live in Illustrator and Photoshop, right? That's how I do a lot of my stuff.
That's right.
So help me understand how Team Foundation Server could help me with this workflow I have today. I mean, I saw Silverlight and all that. That's cool, but I can't do it now. So how would it help me how I work today?
Well, I mean, today, we'll talk a little bit about Team Foundation Server in a bit, but one way you can access that tool, you don't necessarily have to have Windows. You don't necessarily have to have even a web browser.
I don't have Windows, and
okay.
I don't have
that's great. So you're fine. So fortunately, we have a partner called Team Prize. Team Prize makes a plugin called the Team Prize Explorer. It's actually a working client for Team Foundation Server. You don't really have to know the details of Team Foundation Server too much, other than you need to know where you get your tasks. In this case, as a project manager, I've assigned some tasks to Chris here.
And this is for this application that we're working on. We should probably tell them a little bit about it, right?
Sure. So the application we're actually building here. Let's switch back to me.
Sure.
And I'm going to have to open up the solution here real quick.
So, but in a typical workflow, like this application that we worked on, what you asked me to do is kind of help you understand how to design some of the comps and the UI.
That's right.
That we're going to have for a reference implementation, right?
So what I'm about to show you is a stock trader application. You can actually download this from Coplex. It's from our Patterns and Practices group. It's their reference implementation. The solution actually is based on a concept called composite applications. You don't know the details. You don't need to know the details. It's called Prism, but this RI is freely available. This is a relatively simple example. It was actually done by some peeps in the audience here from Nudesic. They did the skins for this application, actually. So I thank them for doing that. It's a very simple example, but it kind of demonstrates a couple of concepts in both WPF and Silverlight. So I thought it would be a good example to use. But we're gonna demonstrate how building an application like this from a process perspective would look, right? From initial task creation to creating the actual wireframes to actually creating the visual comps, and then obviously then prototyping it and then building it out. And of course, we're not going to do that. We've already built it out, but we're going to kind of simulate in a very lightweight fashion what would that look like from a process perspective.
So the first thing I would do And what I do all the time is I like to draw pictures of what I think something's going to look like, right? So you may sit down on a napkin, and I might sketch out, what is that application going to be? What's the key functionality? Before I even do that, though, right, we might map out task flow, right? Or we may do a whole bunch of design exercises to figure out, well, what are the components of this application that we need, right? And then when I do this, typically what I'll do is then I will sit down and I will start building wireframes or something. So,
but gee, it'd be really great if you could take a picture of that. Because as a prototyper or a developer, I'd like to know what your thoughts were.
Well, you're right. I mean,
where do
I
you
could
put that
scan this.
stuff?
Well, you're right. I could probably scan it and put it somewhere if I had somewhere to put it. So, but let's pretend though. I mean, let's say, right now I don't do that, right? I mean, I would go into Illustrator and I would maybe take my little sketches that I started, right, and I would maybe just start playing with things, right? I just start figuring out, what are all my control panels, my grid structure going to be for an app? So I may do a very simple, little wireframe here. And then I'll start collecting that in a document. But I just carry it around on my hard drive here, right? Or sometimes I get asked to use like Basecamp or a website that I throw it up there or a server. And then every once in a while somebody goes to the server and just deletes an entire directory. And if I'm lucky, we can back it up or something. What should I do with stuff like this? How could you help me?
Well, I mean, it's just a file, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not a designer, so I have no idea. So,
okay.
So why don't you just check it into source control? Why don't you just put it in a
Okay, so you want me to go back to this little Team Prize thing here, right?
Yeah.
Which is this little dashboard.
That's right.
And there's a lot of stuff here, right? So this looks like.
How did you even know what to design? How did you even know what wireframe and what the details of the wireframe?
Well, normally I come in and I get a note saying on the project here's the schedule and the tasks and what to do, and I surf the internet for 2 hours in the morning, and I stare at the wall, and then right before lunch, I spend like an hour doing my real work.
Okay. But is there anything in here that will tell you what to work on?
There's some stuff here, but how this is a long list. I mean, what would I do with my file? I've saved my file and I got to give it to you to look at, or we have to have a conversation. What should I do with it? Because what I do is I've got a local directory where I keep all my stuff. What would I do with it?
So assuming you found the task, you would add it to source control.
Okay. So show me where I.
Let me show you. Okay. So it's pretty easy, but you simply have to go find the. And typically, an admin will set this up. They'll set up the actual mapping, right?
But this is kind of the directory I have in my work folder on my computer too, where I've got
That's
my
right.
wireframes
So what we're
and my
doing is
visual
we're
maps.
actually looking at TFS. We're looking at Team Foundation Server. What you're seeing there is actually on the server itself. What you do, or the admin will do, will actually map that to a local directory. Okay. So you're all set up. So you can even pretend this is an empty folder. So what we've done ahead of time was we've actually added this JPEG or a PSD file, Photoshop file, ahead of time. So, but you can go ahead and add, because this is mapped to your local directory, you can go ahead and add a file to Team Foundation Server at will. But we have already done that, so you can actually just open it up.
But what I could do is if I double-clicked this, like let's say I started making my visual comp, like we saw my wireframes there, but if I made my visual comp and I made, I changed this, like I know that there's, I don't know, let's say new logo's coming, right? So I want to pull that out of there, but I could just save this as a new version and then add this to source control. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, so I would save my new version here. And tell me why source control? I mean, I've got my own little versioning system that I can do here.
So did you check that out before you saved it?
Well, no, I haven't even checked this in. This is a new version I just
okay.
made, right?
Oh, okay.
So,
you made a new version, right?
So, and again, it's not in here, right? I see this. I mean, what do? Do I start, when I look at Windows apps, I just start right-clicking, right? I mean,
that's right.
Okay.
So what do you do here? Okay, well, the first thing you do, if you have a new file, you want to add that file to version control, right?
Okay.
So that's the nice thing. It's right in your context menu, right?
Okay.
So you add it to version control.
That's the new one I created.
That's the new file, right?
Okay.
It's just sitting on your desktop.
Okay.
And you hit open.
Okay.
Or save.
So wait. I should add some comments to that, though, shouldn't I? 'Cause
yeah, you probably should have, but that's a habitual thing that people just hit click anyway. And that's fine.
Okay.
So that's a usage pattern. It's one thing you should probably talk to your designers about.
Okay.
Developing is actually add comments to your files. That's a good thing, so other people can actually know what you're doing. So if you're going to share these files, the more metadata, and this will be a reoccurring theme from us, the more data you can put in your files when you're actually checking them in or adding them, the better, okay? You didn't do that, that's fine, but the next time you check it in, you probably should do that.
Okay.
In fact, the cool thing is, in TFS, we can have policies pop up that tell you to remind you to do that.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, rules. So this is kind of my workflow here, and it seems like what you've done is you've shown me how I can take my existing processes and we can add control around this. Now, tell me some of the stuff that I could do here with this, though.
So another thing you can do as well is if you have this checked out, so we're going to actually go check this out. Again, did we check this?
We haven't checked it in yet.
We haven't checked it in. Well, that's good. So I'll recheck it out. So we're going to check this back in, or check it in, period. And one thing you can do besides...
What does that mean, work items?
Oh, that's a good point, or a good question. So I'm a bad actor, aren't I? So I'm gonna put some comments there this time. But one thing you can also do as far as data goes, the power of Team Foundation servers, not just to be able to check in and check out. So we have like a good, a better, and a best scenario. We painted the good scenario, which is get your binary files up on the server. Why? Because you can share them. You can also go back in history. You don't have to come up with a custom versioning mechanism like most people do. They stick it on a file share, and they have their own naming convention, and they have to version it themselves.
So when I look at this, it kind of looks like the detailed work plan we had in Excel a little bit with all my little tasks. Like this one here is, you know, we're probably ready to prototype this.
Yeah,
right
so
now.
this is the better scenario.
Okay.
So now I have the ability to check in that binary file, and I can share that binary file, and it gets versioned, and it has history, which I'll demonstrate later. But now I can actually attach metadata to that file.
Okay.
Right? That's task specific. So I can actually say, attach that to that work item that was assigned to me.
Okay.
Right?
So should I just check it in now?
You just check.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. You got it.
Okay.
Yep. And you just hit check in.
Okay.
And so now what's happening is it's creating what's called a change set. So a change set is basically a combination of the version itself, the version number of that file being checked into TFS, and the metadata that is attached to that file itself. Right? That's very powerful.
So it just took that off my hard drive and put it somewhere else right now.
Yeah, it's sitting in SQL Server,
Okay.
which TFS is based on, and basically now you have metadata attached to your file.
So metadata is kind of like Twitter or Google or something like that, where I could go search on that or run reports on that or something
Exactly,
like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I like this process, but you know, we spent a lot of time talking about blend and workflow and stuff like that.
Right.
Tell me how we could go to the next level, right? You know, like with prototyping and stuff like that. Like,
well, the next level is, and we haven't really talked about the other benefit of TFS, and that's workflow.
Okay.
Now, with a very slight adjustment in usage patterns of just checking in a file, making comments, and then attaching to a work item, so I have some metadata. Another thing we can do, and let's go ahead and check. That one's checked out, so we'll use that one there.
okay.
Another thing we can do when we check in. Having mouse issues here.
Mouse right here, if that helps.
So another thing we can do is, aside from going and associating whatever the work item is, and let's find 226, that's the one I want to work with. I check it, is I can actually change the workflow simply by changing the check-in action, right? You can completely customize the workflow yourself. You can actually say resolve this work item, or close this work item, or say ready for prototype to kick off a workflow to actually signal somebody to actually build that prototype. And we're going to show you that here in a second. Another thing you can do is that you can actually open up that work item over here by looking at your queries. So all those tasks that he's been working with and attaching the visual comp to, or the wireframe in this case to, are right here. And he can customize those queries to anything he wants, right? All these queries.
So like that's the one that I did right there.
That's right.
Prototype. I could click that open and look at it, and I see it says ready for prototype.
It's ready
right
for
now.
prototype.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's actually ready. So we've checked it in, we attached it, it flagged
Okay.
it, it changed it to ready for prototype, and now I'm set. So whoever's doing the prototyping can open up a query. In fact, we have a query that says, bring me all my stuff that's ready for prototype, and you can start
Okay.
working on those items.
Okay, so like as kind of the designer that likes Illustrator and Photoshop, I can see where this is useful, right? I mean, it creates a path, right? But talk to me about Blend a little bit right now.
Okay.
So like in Blend right now, in version 3, I could actually bring in that Photoshop comp, right? And almost use it as kind of a, you know, an acetate, and I could rebuild my whole app with that
right.
sitting in there.
So we got comps, we got them attached to metadata,
Right.
now what?
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to hop, Chris is actually going to hop on my machine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to actually, first of all, the first thing you're going to do, though, is find out what work you need to do, right? So what would you do? It's just like you did before. Instead of all artifacts, I already have a query that I hand-rolled myself called ready for prototype.
Okay, all right.
Right? It just, all it does is bring in all the work items.
So this is basically my list of crap.
Yeah, it's
to
not a
do, is
Mac.
what you're
It's
saying.
not a Mac, so that,
Uh-huh.
yeah. It's a
So
little bit
should
more
I
difficult.
right-click it then, too?
No, you can double-click it.
Okay, just double-click it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And, and let's refresh the query.
Okay.
And okay. Maybe you didn't hit save. Let's go check and make sure.
You know what? I'll go over here and do that right now.
Okay, the query's not pulling it back for some reason. Well, normally it would pull back everything ready for prototype.
Well, let's pretend it did that.
Okay.
And if it did that, I mean, my next logical step in Blend is I want to get that into Blend, right? Because the Photoshop file is not going to do me much good, right? I mean, I need to get it into XAML,
right?
So I can use it, right?
Okay.
So I can actually just import that comp. I mean,
That's
one
right.
thing I could do is just import that comp very quickly into Blend right now, right?
Exactly. So what we can do is you can do a couple things. If you were going to work in Visual Studio and you're working in Blend,
Okay, but I'm not working in Visual
Okay,
Studio.
so we're gonna open it right from Blend. Okay.
Right. So, and there's something different with Blend 3 is Blend 3 is actually integrated with this.
That's right. So we plugged a hole called SketchFlow, or plugged a hole in the prototyping area, and that's called SketchFlow, right?
All right.
You've probably seen the SketchFlow demonstrations already. We're not going to rehash that, but we're going to talk a little bit about SketchFlow in the context of prototyping, in the context of process.
So, but if I do SketchFlow, that's going to be different, though, right? Because the process I just talked about is kind of the old way of doing things, right? It's still kind of throwing it over the wall, right? I'm doing my big comp in Photoshop,
right,
and I'm throwing it over the wall, and maybe I do it in Blend, right? But maybe I have somebody else on my team do it in Blend. SketchFlow is different, though, right? SketchFlow, I would start in Blend versus start in Illustrator.
Right. But you can do more than, I mean, SketchFlow is more than just building a vector prototype. It's about building. It's about like having a whiteboard for you to sketch out ideas.
So we could almost like take my sketches here
and recreate them right in Blend.
there.
Exactly.
And you've kind of got my flow that we mapped out here for the application too that we could do. Okay.
That's right. So I started doing that. But what you can also do then is you could take the default screen, and since I haven't sketched that out yet, I can't remember what the ideas that I wanted to add. So why don't I just import, since the visual comp that you did earlier is now in source control, right?
So
all I have to do is
I
have to check it out from source control, which I did already.
Okay.
So all I need to do now is just to go ahead and import it. So I'm going to go to the actual directory that is mapped to TFS. Right? You can actually tell that it's mapped to TFS by that little green mark. And by the way, there's actually a little tool if you don't want to use Blend and you want to check in and check out files, and you are not using a Macintosh, you're using Windows, there's a little Windows shell extension that you can actually install that comes from the TFS team. A lot of people don't know about it. It's in a power tool. It's a Windows shell extension that adds the Team Foundation server to the context menu. So I can just open up Windows itself, the Windows Explorer, and I can check in, check out, add files, and even associate to work items right from the Windows shell. More than that, if I don't have Blend 3, I can actually open up Blend 2 and just use the file open dialog box. So any common dialog box will support the Windows shell extension.
So it sounds like what you're telling me is like Blend 3 is cool. I could see how I could use that a lot in my design process. But what we're really talking about here is the whole life cycle of how we develop something, right?
Right.
And what you're doing is you're putting a lot of data around that can kind of inform me on the progress of an entire project. So if I'm a project manager, I can start looking at stuff and saying, wow, Chris is adding a lot of new features here that we didn't think about, right? And where's that coming from?
Right.
Right?
Correct. Yes.
So do you want to expand a little bit about what Team Foundation Server means in that workflow? Because to me it sounds like you don't have to have it to use Blend. You don't have to have it to use any of your existing design processes, but it can add a lot of value on top of those.
That's right. So like I said before, if I need to sketch out this prototype or create this prototype, I can now use Blend 3 to actually import your visual comp.
So you're doing the Photoshop import.
So I'm just importing. There's all your layers, yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and import that, and I'm going to put that on the stage.
Okay.
That's fine. And now I have something at least to work on. I have a visual comp, a raster image that has now been broken apart into layers, so I can now start taking that and actually build a real XAML from it.
But even before that, I could take the sketch flow and just say, hey, look, here's my rendered comp, here's the interaction flow, right? And get an approval on that before I even started doing that, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly. So one other thing that you may have noticed here that's new is the little check here. That means that all these projects are actually checked into Team Foundation Server. That's actually new at Blend 3. Works really the same way as the TFS Explorer in that you can right-click. I can check in, undo pending changes, get latest version. These are just normal change management features right from within the Solution Explorer within Blend. Okay.
Okay, and that's definitely new. I mean, in the old version of Blend, nobody has Expression 3, shipping. It's not shipping right now. what could people do in the interim, like with Blend 2?
Like I mentioned, with Blend 2.
Would you use that shell extension? Would that work?
It would actually work.
Okay.
Glad you brought that up. No, like I said before, any file open dialog box will honor the shell extension. You can tell that by the little green arrow means.
Okay.
So as long as you have a file that's actually mapped in TFS, you'll actually get the TFS menu item that shows up. And so I can check in, check out right from here.
And that means it work with Photoshop, Illustrator, pretty much
It'll work with anything sitting in that file, like I said, any file you can check in.
So I could throw like media files up there? Like,
Absolutely.
what if I had a ton of media? Like, it wouldn't work though. They're too big. They're gigabytes of files, right? That wouldn't work.
Actually, it would work. Team Foundation Server has been tested with files well over 4 gigabytes. So it's really a limitation of SQL Server or anything. It's not a TFS limitation.
So I could like tag data around my creative brief, my proposal, the different, let's say we had a big video on the homepage, all the 4 versions that I got from the editor, we could probably have them use this.
That's right.
It up there.
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So to close out this workflow here, so let's say you completed your prototype. I'm going to go back into to Visual Studio here. I'm going to undo checkout. And like we showed before, when you're done with a particular, to kick off a workflow, there's several ways you can do that, but one way you can do that is to change the state. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and query my artifacts here, and simply by changing the state, in this case we changed it to ready for prototype, that kicked off a workflow. And we can save that. And now, when he's done with the prototype, what he can do is he can go back into his client of choice and change the state again. So by changing the state to closed, let's see if my query works this time. I'm having some issues here, looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting.
Is our server not working?
I don't know. Let me close on all projects and try again.
Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about what we just kind of showed everybody, because some of it looks complex.
No, it's actually pretty easy. The usage pattern is the most difficult thing to actually get people to do. That is, first of all, designers getting them to check in files into TFS. That's the first thing. If you want to get to that good state, that's the one thing you want to do. Second thing is you want to get them to associate that with work items. You can actually do a couple things. You can actually install a policy to remind them to actually either create a work item or to associate a work item with that check-in. And the third thing is really not something that they would typically do unless they're prototyping, and that's using Sketchflow. Added to that, which is the final
thing. If I got feedback, though, I mean, because I noticed I was over here when I was talking, I could add a new requirement, too, and put it right in there that we could track, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's I call that adding features, right? What do project managers call that? Scope creep, right? But if we have data around that, we could probably track it a little bit, right?
Right. So what's the whole point of this, right? So there's actually an analogy by a gentleman named Sam Guggenheimer. He has a book on software engineering. He talks about how that maps to TFS. And he talks about that most development teams, they'll actually they'll do bug management. They have bug databases managing bugs. Well, that's great. And they'll use source control. That's great too. The problem is just having bug tracking is like driving a car, but steering your car away after you've already hit the tree. All right? So TFS is all about steering the car before you hit the tree. You want to be able to any one point in time take a look at where your project sits, having full visibility where the developer is at any one particular point. Why do designers care? Well, as a designer, I should be able to go into any one of these, or the developer should be able to go into any one of these work items. And let's say I've discovered that through development, I need a new button. I want you to create a new button, or I need you to create a new nav bar. So what do? You're not sitting here across the table from me. You could be on vacation, or you could be in a different office, or whatever. All I would need to do is select and actually link another work item to my existing work item, and it created what's called a change request. This is actually in the UX process template. And so all I need to do is describe what needs to be done. I have a system of record, and it's automatically linked back to the original work item here. So you can see the link back to the original work item. What that's doing for the project manager is the project manager can then run a report seeing that level of traceability. So imagine having all your requirements trace back as well. So every task you do, everything you're completing traces back to those requirements, and you can bubble those up into a report.
So like as one example, when we saw this morning where we built the whole app in Sketchflow, we actually generated a document that had requirements. I could just take all those requirements, put them in here as requirements in the tool.
Exactly.
That we can use for a project.
It's a full requirements management system.
So I don't need to use project, right? I don't need to use. I can pretty much use whatever I want to start.
Yeah, but you absolutely can. Yeah.
Okay.
You use the tool you're comfortable with. It fully works with Office or Excel as well as Project. As a client, so if I'm a project manager using Project, you can use Project today, and you can actually read the work items right from TFS directly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so I discussed linking, and so really the last thing part of our demo is actually showing you the reporting. So like I said, what does this all mean? This all eventually bubbles up to a report. What's happening behind the scenes, every change I make, every check-in I make or save to the work item that I make actually is hitting the transactional database in SQL Server. Behind the scenes, every 15 minutes, that data is moved from the transactional database to the data warehouse. Okay? In that data warehouse, there's a nice big cube sitting there, allowing me to write reports against it. Well, the good news is I don't need to know the details of that. I just have to run the reports. For instance, out of the box, I have this report. Oops. Okay, I'm going to ignore that. I have this report called the scope creep report or unplanned work report.
That was from my review with the customer yesterday. Sorry about that.
So I'm going to go ahead and change the filter here. This is just based on SQL Server reporting services. Okay, so there's no magic here. In fact, if I want to write a custom report, I can go ahead and do so just using SRS. And this particular report actually comes out of the box with the UX process template that we're actually building. Let me change that parameter to March. Will make a little more sense then. And rerun it. So this is going against the data warehouse. This is effectively going against the data cube. This is a live report. In fact, you can actually see that we've actually added a couple of requirements today. Because you can see the date right here. So basically, like I said, you can do scope creep based on requirements. You can do scope creep based on scenarios, user stories, anything you want, right? And this is a very simple report. All I did was vary the dates. What I did is I varied the start date, which is over here. That's the date of the project. And then I varied the completion date. And that's the plan completion date. And you decide when your plan should be complete. So anything after that plan completion date essentially is scope creep, okay? That's the orange matter that you see on top. So it's a very simple report, but it's one of those aha moments for project managers kind of saying, okay, this is an ever-crawling thing. I need to get a hold of it. I get a handle on this.
But you could also run reports if, let's say, because when I used to do Flash work or After Effects, I'd say, I can do that in 4 hours. And then maybe it takes me 20. You could run a report on that too, right, and see how much we're slipping off the schedule.
Absolutely. You can run a report almost anything you want. All the data that's actually captured, the source control data, the work item data, whatever you decide to capture, and we'll talk a little bit in a second about what you can customize, which is just about anything, but I'll get a little more specific. Another report that is actually really handy and comes out of the box is the reactivation report, okay? This tells me, are my requirements, for instance, are they sound? Do I have to go back into my requirements, for instance, and reactivate the requirement? For example, let's say you got the requirement, you got a task sitting there in Team Prize, and you implemented the design, and it wasn't quite what the analyst or the super user had intended, right?
Okay.
So you have to go back in and you have to reactivate the requirement. Why is that? Well, maybe it wasn't documented correctly. Okay. Either way, So
it can kind of tell me where I have weakness in my entire
Exactly.
UX process is what you're telling me. Like, for example, maybe my research cycle wasn't very good, right?
Exactly.
Or my synthesis cycle wasn't very good. Okay.
It's a very simple thing. It's adding automation to IT process, right? That's the whole point. You don't have to build these reports on the fly, and so thus you're saving time.
Okay.
Right. All right. So that's really about it for the reports.
Okay.
Okay. So let's just go back to the presentation.
Okay. There we go.
All right. So what we're trying to address here, obviously, and Chris kind of pointed it out, is improving visibility. Visibility for project managers, visibility for designers, visibility for developers.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
I'm curious with the audience here. How many people just don't have problems with this? It's smooth sailing right now. So we all have, put your hand down, Rich. So we all sometimes have challenges with this, right? And it's probably not just internally with us, right? How many people are service businesses? You're not just doing this for yourself, but you're doing it for somebody else. Some of us. That's where the real challenge is, right? It's when you're working with customers and the level of visibility that they have to have into things. And it seems like you throw global deployment, right, or global resources working on this at different times, and then add designers and developers on top of that. That's where a lot of this stuff gets hard, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and TFS was actually built to be distributed. And in fact, there's kind of a running joke that TFS is actually used to do multiple file copies across the wire because it's actually faster than using Windows Explorer. It actually used research technology to do the file copy
Don't
itself.
tell the Windows team.
So it's actually quite fast for distributed communication and distributed work item management and check in and check out. Like I said, you can document your requirements here. It's a full requirements management system, and you can track those back to your tasks. One thing I was doing before we actually built this content was I was able to do some discovery with some local agencies that we work with in Austin, and I was able to kind of get the same theme heard over and over again, which was. UX process, as you know, for those designers especially, is relatively waterfall, right? And there's reasons for that. We're not going to go into process patterns here, but
or it could be this could be in a circle, right? And they could kind of do it over and over again.
Right.
It seems like, but those two things kind of happen in separate stages.
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now,
The strategy and requirements, obviously,
Yeah.
interaction design, and maybe you can take UI design, visual design, and incorporate that as part of the iteration. Incorporate that as part of the build out. Make it more agile. That's absolutely possible. In fact, M. Jackson Wilkinson has a great presentation on slideshare.net that I'd encourage you to download if you want to understand how to do that. But the problem is, or the issue here is, we really don't care. Okay. TFS is absolutely process agnostic. We don't care what process you use. You pick the process, and you provision TFS to work the way you work. And that's the point, okay? So, I mean, because the goal here is what? I mean, as a designer, as a role, what do you want to do? I mean,
well, I want to design, but I want to make sure you don't screw up my stuff.
Exactly, right? And so if you need work from me, you have a means of letting me know, right?
Sure.
And as a developer, if I need something done, I have a way of telling you, and I can go back, I can actually go back here and pull up a query and say, oh, wait a second, these are all the changes that you made. Oh, thank you. These are all the changes that you made at any one point in time, because you have a built-in audit log, right? So you can go back at any point in time and see what changes were made field by field by field in that work item, right? Thank you.
So this is Team Foundation Server. It's an add-in, right, that can be used by Visual Studio, can be used by Blend, can be used by any tool we want that's a server. There's building blocks that sit on top of it,
That's right.
And a lot of this comes out of what I can kind of consider boring stuff because I'm a designer, but that we know is important, right? We all need project management, right? We need version control. We need reporting. It's useful to know what steps somebody has to do and when we can see them. But then finally, it has some pretty rigorous things that developers need for team build, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, and then what builds on top of this, though, is there's roles that we have in development, right? And what Team Foundation Server does is it kind of accounts for all of those roles, and it does it through that process template.
That's right.
Right?
That's the glue.
Okay, but that process template that's the glue, it's not going to be the same for everybody, right?
That's right. And you can customize that process template, and I'm going to talk about what you can customize and what's available out there. And as Chris mentioned, we have several clients that already exist, and we have a web version called Team Web Access, which I'm going to show you here in a second, that you can actually use even from the Macintosh as well. So I'll show you that here.
So if we kind of think about Blend and what we announced about Blend, Blend is kind of the designer edition of Team Foundation Server, right? It could be the primary interface into this.
Sure.
And then a role.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing we've actually seen with Team Foundation Server is really only 90% of our customers are using TFS simply for version control in it, but as they get used to TFS, they'll start using work item tracking. So it's really a travesty that the full range of features of TFS aren't used, because it really, version control is just one minor component of that.
Okay.
So let me quickly show you Team Web Access. And this is the full web version of TFS, or the TFS client.
This probably only works in IE, or?
No, it works with Firefox as well.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so you can use Firefox. So this is, like I said, it's a pure web version. And the great thing is, when I talk about the customization that you can make to these process templates, it actually proliferates all the way to Team Web Access. You don't actually have to recreate anything from the web to actually make this show up, these work items show up. So all the queries that you saw before, that you saw me working with in TFS Explorer, actually show up in Team Web Access as well.
Okay, so is there an iPhone version of this yet that I can use?
Not quite.
Okay.
So this is actually a cheap way of seeing the traceability I I mentioned earlier. So I pulled back a query called design requirements, and I can open up one of the requirements, for instance, and I can see all the tasks attached to that requirement, right? It's a very simple way of seeing what artifacts, in this case, are actually attached to this particular requirement, okay? If I go to all artifacts, I can actually see the actual artifact we actually been working with, and that's the one that you were working with from Macintosh.
Okay.
From the Macintosh. And,
right.
and so, so I can go here to, let's see, my history tab, and I can even take a look at the original sketch, right?
Okay.
Which is kind of nice.
Okay.
Another thing I didn't show you is you can actually do email alerts as well. So every time I make a change to a work item, I can actually set up email alerts. This is also in the Power Tool. And I can customize those email alerts based on almost any filter, just like in the queries. So I can see, for instance, you saw the little comments I made when I checked in that file, and those that gibber that I put in there. Mm-hmm. That showed up. It showed, I have an alert that actually tells me, hey, something's been checked in that's been assigned to me, okay, or it's related to me. Notify me of it.
Okay.
Another cool feature is I can actually look at that one work item that we were playing with. And like I said, I can actually see the sketch right from there. And right from...
So I can do that from a website then?
That's right.
All that stuff?
That's
okay.
right.
So you could see like my comps that I uploaded in there from that website?
Exactly. In
okay.
fact, the cool thing is because we have that linking, and because we have a link from the comp to the actual wireframe, I can actually reference that link, and I can actually see the comp as well. So you can actually build full storyboards within T Foundation.
So if I was stuck at the airport and I was worried about my team, I could actually go into this kind of tool and start looking at it and see the progress people made and how things have been built on pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You can definitely make, as long as you can get access to the internet.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's the last demo. So we'll go back to the presentation. How are we doing on time? So like we mentioned before, use the tool that you know, right? So if you only have web access, and there's reasons why you would not use web. There's one thing you don't get with web is just check in, check out. The Team Web Access is really meant for project managers, designers, those who aren't going to be checking in and check out source files often. Then you have the full T Foundation Server Explorer from Visual Studio. You have the blend, obviously. We even have an Eclipse plugin. So Team Prize also makes,
really?
yes. So if you're doing Java development, we don't care what kind of development you're doing, right? If you're doing Java development, there's a full Eclipse plugin for TFS as well. So what are process templates? We've kind of been teasing you with process templates. Really, all they are, if you break down a process template, all they are is an XML file, okay? They define what you want done from a process perspective, okay? They're the blueprint for that process.
So it's almost like I have friends that are pilots, and pilots are really big into checklists, right? You've got to have that checklist that you do for everything. It almost sounds like that's what it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Who's familiar with Scrum? Okay. What is Scrum? Right? What's the value of Scrum? Aside from being agile, and now I'm not talking about paired programming or the Scrum meetings.
You should have asked who likes Scrum first.
Yes.
Okay.
So the great thing about Scrum is you have, a backlog. You have one place to look for, say, all those product scenarios, requirements, and bugs. That's the product backlog, right? If you want to use the ultimate analogy, TFS is one big product backlog, and that's the work item. Work item is just all it is a backlog item. In fact, there's a Scrum template out there, which I'll talk about in a second, that you can download for TFS if you want to use Scrum. Okay. So also, we actually get and define in a process template is referred to as a work item type. A work item type can be a bug, an issue. In this case, we were working with artifacts.
Yeah, but it's the actual thing that I make, but it's all the metadata that sits around.
That's right.
It too.
It's just metadata.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just
okay.
the type itself is just the metadata. What you call it is up to you. The UX process template, which we'll announce here in a second, has an artifact work item type. Okay. It's also the forms. It's what you see, right? It's the validation that you have when you're actually entering the data in.
So like some of the stuff, like you had a lot of stuff in some of your forms. I mean, if I wanted a simpler workflow for people.
You can make it simple as you want.
Okay, all right.
One thing we learned from one of our customers, Dell, is they try to do everything with their process template. They try to customize it. In fact, they spent about a year customizing it. And we found out the hard way, or they found out the hard way, that wasn't the best approach. It's always better to build up than to tear down, Because when you have a tear down mentality, you tend to keep everything, and you inject complexity. So it's better to build up. And that's the lesson that they learned. What they did, and they eventually did, is they whittled down the process template to literally 2 work item types. Okay? So keep it simple, especially if you want your designers to use it, or as designers want to use it. So another thing that's actually in the work item, in the process templates are queries. Queries, you saw the queries, you customize the queries, and there's queries out of the box. They come actually in the template. But as you add your own queries, you can do so once even after your process template's created. Reports. You saw some of the reports. Some reports will be in the template. Some you can customize and add later as well. And then the workflow. Workflow can be as complex as you want it to be. Right? Or it could be very, very simple. Even the most simplest workflow is very effective. In our case, all we did was change the state. And that alerted me that, hey, I have prototypes to work on. Or alerted me as a developer that I have a build-out to actually work on. Okay? And all that did was change one field. That's all that workflow actually accomplished. And it was pretty effective, hopefully, by doing that. And then the documentation, right? You actually have process documentation. What if I don't know the process you guys came up with? You can actually put the documentation right in the process itself. So right within Visual Studio or right within TeamPrise, I can pull up the docs.
Okay.
You can, like I said, you can create your own, but out of the box you get 2 process templates. You get MSF for Agile. You get MSF for CMMI. That's a maturity model. And you can create your own from those. You can also download Scrum. It's still free. There's one for URAP, RUP as well, and there's many more. I think there's like 15 or so out there. And we're announcing actually today a community project for a UX process template. It's already out there. The bare bones project, which we are still working the kinks out of, as you can see, is out there. It will have full workflow when we're done with it. It'll have a myriad of other work item types that we're working with, and more importantly, it'll have some reports, which is a little more requires a little more pre-thought because we don't know which reports we want to put out there yet, but they will be out there eventually. In fact, this is the feedback we're looking for. What work item types would you like to see? What kind of workflow would you like to see? What's typical, right? What reports would you like to see? That's the kind of the feedback that we would love to have. So what can be customized? And I kind of already touched on some of this already, but you can customize the work item types. You can put any structure you want, any fields you want, and any forms you want, and make it present any way you want. You can create your own queries. One nice thing with the Power Tools is you get a process template editor. Okay, so it's a nice little editor. It's a little schema editor that you can actually add or remove fields from an existing process, or just create one from scratch. What you see there at the top there is the workflow designer. You actually get a full workflow designer. In red, you see those are the states, right? They could be active. You saw the active state, the closed state, and the ready for prototype state. That would be represented by those red shapes there. The blue shapes are the transitions. The transitions simply set fields, for instance, like the reason field. Like, what are the reason I'm transitioning from active to closed? Am I closing out the bug? Am I deferring the bug? Was it by design, for instance?
So you could kind of train customers on this, or clients, a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if it sounds complicated, it can be. Absolutely can be. But it doesn't have to be, right? You can whittle down this UX process template, like I said, to a couple work item types and associate those to tasks and be done with it and be very, very effective.
Okay.
Some of these are some other sample work item types. The ones in black are really out of the box. The ones in white are the ones that we're thinking for the UX process template. These are kind of up in the air. Like we have wireframe task. That could just be a task. It doesn't have to be a wireframe task. It's up to you, like I said, how detailed you want it. It could be a task, and then one of the fields could be, is it a wireframe? Is it a visual comp? Is it an IA document? That's exactly what we did.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And here's an example of the guidance. You have the guidance to actually see. You can see it surface right from Firefox as well as Visual Studio. So if I'm using Team Web Access from Firefox here, I can bring up the process guidance in case I don't understand the process and want documentation on it. So are we any better? Are we best? What do you think?
We're getting better, I think.
Getting better? We got some work to do, don't we?
I think we do. I don't know. What do people think of this? Does it make sense? Does it sound scary, complex? Does it sound like it solves real-world problems that we have? I think one of the things we could do to get better, though, is think about the entire part of a business, right, and all the big things we have. So talk a little bit again about other things we could do. Like, I mean, I could be an account guy, right, and I could have my proposals loaded into the system. I could probably put tasks around those, right, if I wanted to.
Yeah, and we don't want to beat this to death, but even if you don't use work items, and I encourage you to still use them, binaries need, this is the message, binaries need love too. Check your binaries in, right? You leverage source control. Just from a sharing standpoint and a history standpoint. You can pick a specific version. You have a place where you can back things up automatically.
So I could even manage, like if I had a lot of photos and assets that were licensed for different
video
projects
files,
or customers.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So shelving is a feature also that's worth mentioning. So let's say you don't want to check it in, right? You're not ready. You're still working on a comp. You don't want anybody else to see it, right? So you don't want to check it in. And because there's maybe policies or whatever, and you don't want to, you just want to keep that to yourself. There's a feature called shelving that you can actually take your file and shelve it to a location. Think of it as like a temporary check-in.
Okay.
It gets placed on TFS, and it allows me to say have a design review. So let's say you're my design lead, and I want to review a design with you before I check it in.
Okay.
The shelve is a great place to put it. You name it, and you.
So let's say hypothetically my hotel got stolen out of my hotel. If it was shelved, I could go access it.
And that actually really did happen to you recently.
A friend of ours, yes.
Yes. And like I said, it works with large files. We keep beating that down. And there's distributed file support or team support out of the box. Now I showed you a couple of the reports. There is a myriad of reports on the internet that you can download for TFS. And the ones that actually, there's several reports that actually come with the process templates that ship out of the box. I showed you the item reactivation report. I showed you the scope creep report. But you have things like the project velocity report. That's a great report to kind of predictively figuring out how effective your team is, right? So the velocity actually measures your transition rate. Like how many times am I going from active to prototype?
So you mean I'd have to be accountable for what I do now?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah. But it's good.
But I could do this I could have 6 projects in my business, right? And I could sit down and look across that business and have a pretty good idea of where I'm going with all of these projects.
Exactly. And now this is more of a PM thing, but this is the whole theme. The whole theme of this session is actually business value from UX, right?
Yeah,
or at least the UX team,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Decreasing. I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Standish group, but they post a biannual report. And if you've ever been to a Team Foundation server session, you probably heard us talk about this. But it's a scary number that 71% of projects either fail or over budget or over time, right? And they have more details you can read, and that was based on 2004 data.
Absolutely, and you'll hear other sessions at MIX. I believe it's Friday. There's a session by Anthony Franco where he talks about the 10 things that make RIA projects fail. And you'll see that he builds on a lot of these things. A lot of the stuff he'll talk about is scope creep, right? It's fixed bids, right? It's all these things that challenge you as a project. And what this does is it gives you visibility into controlling how that happens.
So what's happening tomorrow with Codename Rosario is the next version of Team Foundation Server and Team System. We're going to have built-in instant messenger supports, which is great for agile teams that want to talk to somebody right away, right from TFS, right from Visual Studio.
And let's equate tomorrow. You mean future, not really
Yes,
Thursday.
not literally tomorrow,
okay.
yes. So we're going to have an improved agile process. We have MSF for Agile. We're going to improve on that with a different, slightly modified template. We're going to give you a dashboard. So not only can you see the reports like you saw, right, from the web, but you'll see a whole dashboard. We'll give you an actual dashboard effect for a kind of improved business intelligence, or we like to call it process intelligence, right? And then one really nice thing is that's been asked is what if analysis. What can I do with TFS if and the report's great, but what about what if analysis, right? So in Rosario, you're going to actually be able to right click one of those queries, and it's actually going to build you a pivot table. So that's going to allow you to actually create custom reports very, very quickly. You can create custom reports today, but you need to have a little bit of knowledge of SQL Server reporting services. Tomorrow, you won't have any of that. You can work with a pivot table. You can create a report in TFS, and so anybody will be able to do that, which will be pretty cool.
Okay.
Yep. So that is it.
All right.
Thank you. Your feedback is absolutely welcome. This is the first time we presented this material. Hopefully it didn't show too badly.
Yeah. We have time for a few questions, too, but I think the key thing to do is take this in context with what SketchFlow can offer for your business. And there's going to be entirely new workflows. And people that master them are going to be able to move really, really fast. and be very, very precise about what they build. And one of the things that Christian and I think about is how can we actually leverage the good things that design can bring to a process and the good things that development bring to a process so we can be faster and better and more flexible about the things we do. So hopefully you got a small taste of that today. We're ready to take arrows or questions for 15 minutes.
Yes.
And for the rest of you, it's time to go have fun.
And feedback for the process template, please. That's what we need. Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Hey,
Hey.
are there any ideas, any work being done to integrate TFS with SharePoint?
Well, in what manner? Because I mean, SharePoint actually ships with. I mean, TFS actually ships with SharePoint or uses WSS 3.0.
Okay.
So what do you want to do?
Well, right now, my company uses SharePoint in its IT
Yep.
to as bug list, as to-do lists, all that jazz, and there is the web access portion of Team Foundation Server. I
portal
guess
site.
that would make it sort of moot to have a.
So you're talking about like taking a customized list, the metadata, and synchronize it with work items?
Exactly,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I actually have a white paper. If you have WSS 3.0, I can show you how to do that with Excel as an intermediary.
Okay.
So give me your email and I'll send it to you.
Hi. What about the other expression products? Is there integration with TFS with those yet, or in planning? Like media, for instance.
The native so today, yes. Like I said, that Windows Shell extension will actually work with Adobe Illustrator on Windows. We don't care if there's a file open dialog and uses a comma dialog. You can use a Windows Shell extension.
And I would say you can use the Shell extension with the other products today. I don't know if we have anything to say about the other Expression Studio products.
Expression Plan and Web both need free support TFS.
Okay.
Okay. There you go.
Any ideas for managing large asset files, like logos, graphics, and then being able to search somehow for those assets to reuse across other projects?
You can check in any file you want and associate any file you want to the work items today.
Okay.
As far as search goes, that's coming in Rosario.
Rosario.
And then there are, at that scale, there are existing products in Expression Studio for that if we look at Expression Media and how you can use some of that. But we'd love to hear your scenarios that you're challenged with, and we always think about that for future product requests.
There's other we could talk offline, but there's other tricks that some other customers are doing today to get search.
Yeah.
Today, you can use the build server to push it out and then index that. So we could talk about that.
Hey, I use Fireworks now planned. I'm wondering about control and checking stuff in. And I've generally worked in a bit of a silo with government, with design artwork, and then going to programmers. But in this situation, how often from a design perspective are you checking in revisions? Say I have a 40 to 50 screen app, which is what I usually work with. Are you checking in revisions to every screen that you're making all the time and putting out new files?
You can do whatever you want, and you don't need to check in each file individually. So let's say you have a collection of 50 screens that you bang on every day. At the end of the day, you can just upload that whole directory.
Okay.
So you need to annotate any individual areas where you need to call something out, but you can make it as hard or as easy as you want.
Okay. You check in the whole folder, and TFS only does so every change you make to that binary file, it's only storing that delta, right?
Okay.
So it's very efficient the way it stores data. So you're not going to blow up your database. That's your concern.
But from your experience, is it better to work that way and to check in all the time, or are you checking individual screens in?
You know what? What we're doing is so new.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have enough telemetry or data to give you an honest answer right now.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Howdy. From the SharePoint discussion we talked about earlier, from your perspective, how does the workflow work for people that are outside of the developer designer mentality? Clients, for example, that collaboration with clients, they can view it seems like, through the web
That's
interface.
right. Yeah.
Right.
But is there a mechanism for them to collaborate back in an agile environment? It's very important to us in our environment that the client has their say-so. They're as much a part of the design process.
We would love for you to get your info, because we're trying to figure that out too. We're actually working with a couple of customers. I don't know. I can't say who they are, can I? Yeah. So Lutron and Tribal DDB sitting right behind you. We're trying to go through some of those processes right now. I have a couple other design studios that I work with. We're trying to figure that out. And, you know, our big evil idea is, you know, gosh, it would be great if we could make the account people, you know, be involved in that kind of stuff, or figure out who said we could do it in 15 days, that kind of stuff. So we're looking to figure that out.
From a technology, both from a technology standpoint and a licensing standpoint, you can certainly do it technology-wise. Team Web Access works outside the firewall. It's not just a reading environment. I didn't really go into actually creating work items, but you can actually create work items. You can actually hit the portal, right? You can actually add documents. You can run reports, right? You need a Team Foundation Server license to do that. We do have another licensing exclusion if you just want to view work items, though, where you don't need a TFS cal.
But to be very clear, I mean, this is a theory we have that's a great idea, and you know, if it takes off, there's probably a whole new portfolio of products and services that comes out of it that don't exist yet, too.
Great.
If I check in a change that breaks the build, why can't I edit a change set?
Then you get flogged.
Why can't I edit a change set to make it a good change set?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
Why can't I edit a change set so that it includes more files? If I missed one on a check-in and it breaks the build.
Why can't you? I still think, I'm sorry. You can't,
why can't I edit the change set?
Why can't you edit the change set? I don't know what you mean by edit the change set.
If I check in 3 out of 4
Are you looking
files,
for gated check-ins?
I'm interested in changing the change set so it includes more than what it did the first time around.
Yeah, I think the solution to that would be gated check-ins to avoid you from breaking the build in the first place. That's coming in Rosario. So what it does is actually simulates a build but won't check it in until it won't break the build. If it doesn't break the build, it'll check it in. That's referred to as a gated check-in. That's coming in Rosario.
Okay. So we got 5 minutes left. If people have other questions, that's great. Some of you guys want to come up and say hi, that's great. Or enjoy Tao tonight. And this is your first time at MIX. I'd suggest you at least go there for a little while. It's quite an experience. So thank you all.
Thanks, guys.